What if learning a language isn't just for fun or something you add to your curriculum, but a matter of survival, identity, and being seen? Today we are joined by Maryann Hasso, Arab American educator, researcher, and advocate for multilingual learners who often arrive in schools shaped by entirely different expectations and realities than their own. In her work across classrooms and communities, Maryann examines what happens when students, often new to the country, the language, and the culture, are expected to adapt instantly, perform academically, and navigate a reality that's unfamiliar at every level. Her research and books explore the deeper issues: instructional inequities, assessment gaps, cultural misalignments, and the emotional weights of being constantly misunderstood. Today's conversation reminds us of the importance of truly seeing and hearing students, to recognize that their journey is not just academic but existential. Because learning a new language means learning to exist and to be understood and seen in an entirely new world. Welcome to Echoes of Meaning.
Okay, my name is Maryann Hasso. I am a English teacher and also a credit recovery teacher. I My background is I have a bachelor's degree in English from Cal Poly Pomona. I have 3 master's degrees and the PhD. My master's is all about literacy, sort of how to help students, learn better. My PhD is focused on educational leadership, but my dissertation was on English learners. Um, Most of my research is sort of revolves around multilingual learners. Uh, I myself, I'm Arab American. My parents are from Jordan, but they raised, they're from there, but we're from America. And there were a lot of barriers, language barriers between me and my parents. So I would always, that was always the issue with sort of growing up in that environment. So I was able to take that experience and sort of transfer it into the classroom with the students that I was dealing with. So the English learners that I had when I went to the high school that I'm currently at, Adelanto High School, there was that barrier, just like the barrier I had with my parents. So I was able to take sort of all the tools that I had, whether it's, translating curriculum, translating what I was saying to them, and sort of modifying it so that they were able to learn, what I was teaching. Um, I work with many students currently in my credit recovery class that are English learners. Some in the past have it was too difficult for them to pick up the language through the computer program. They needed to be in a classroom with another EL teacher. But the current ones I have are, are thriving with the computer program and the classroom environment I'm creating for them, the friendly inviting environment, and as well as me offering them tools to help them learn the language in the computer program and learn in the classroom, whatever classes that they're taking. In my district, the curriculum is pretty straightforward. Uh, Most of it, the current curriculum, we just changed it like 5 or 6 years ago so that some of it was in English, like they had the English version, and then the authors decided to translate a lot of the stories so that multilingual learners had access to the Spanish version or whatever version was available and the English version so they could switch back and forth when I was instructing. Uh, and so that's sort of a little bit about how I started this.
And how did you realize the struggles and the ways that you had to be able to communicate better and help your students from, let's say, maybe the inside?
The way I knew the struggles was I was trying to talk to them in English, and they would look around like they had no idea what I was talking about. So I did a few things. I pulled students that were bilingual, both proficient in English and Spanish, and I would have them ask them to translate for me, which was helpful, a little helpful. And then I would use the Google Translation app. I would actually use it on my computer, and just type in exactly what I wanted to say and then blast it, so they could hear it from where I was. And then they were able to pick up what I was trying to say. And over time, as I continued to speak to them in English, they were starting to pick up the language. And Google Translate and all the other apps and things and tools were becoming obsolete, and they were able to pick up exactly what I was saying. If I noticed they were struggling with what I was saying, then I'd resort to other students that were proficient in that language, and I'd say, "Can you help me communicate this to the student?" Which is very helpful for bilingual and multilingual students, having them in the classroom with their peers that are bilingual. Not only does it help them socially, it helps them with the whole learning process, and fitting in with the school, because that is, sometimes hard for our students. I have one student that she is, I believe she's French. I forget what country she's from, but she's like mixed with, I'm not sure if it's South Africa or something, but she's very proficient in French. So I was struggling with her, because she only knew French. She wasn't able to pick up what I was trying to say. So I was able to use the Google Translate app, and I know a little bit of French, and I was able to do all that and communicate to her. And eventually she got it, and she is now like successfully doing very well, in the course. So I think the main thing is creating an environment where the students are able to communicate in their home language and make them feel comfortable, using their home language at any time. And then you slowly transitioning them into the English language, because that is what we ultimately want to do. They want to learn the English language. Their parents want them to learn the English language. So we have to sort of obviously interject all of those lessons and instructional strategies. But I also make it comfortable for them to, to speak in their home language with me as well. And so it's easy to do that if they have the app, the Google Translate app, or any sort of translation app, to do that with me. And being, Arab American and coming from the sort of background that I have, where we're pretty Americanized, but my parents weren't, that uncomfortable feeling that my parents were feeling, in different social areas, I understood. So I try to be very empathetic with that, that I understand where they're coming from, that they're scared, that they don't know, they want to do well. And you just sort of have to give them that pathway to use what they're comfortable with, and then transition them to what they need to learn, and to allow them to use both in their demeanor in class and with their peers.
I get it. You said that you were working with something about credits with the students. How is that called? Credits what?
It's credit recovery. So a lot of
Yeah.
students, like I said, they come in as immigrant students. Many of them, they come straight. I mean, some just come from different school districts, maybe that they're not succeeding in, and no English background, but they have classes that they need to make up. Some are junior level, senior level kids, and they need to make up those freshman, sophomore year classes. So that's already an overwhelming sort of, uphill battle for them. And so they have to do what's called A through G requirements in the United States. If this in the K through 12 system, in order for them to, to get into a 4-year university or a 2-year university, they have to be A through G approved, which means the courses that they take have to be like college level, college preparation courses. So that's why they have them in these, a lot of English learners in these, credit recovery classes. And then a lot of other students are just simply struggling with English, struggling with whatever it is that they're learning in the classes, and they have to be in this computer-based class to learn the language. The nice thing is about these computer-based classes is that they can translate everything on the computer in any language they want, which is very helpful to them. So the questions are in Spanish or French or German or Italian, and the choices that they make are in the language that they are, comfortable with. But in the English computer courses, they have to type. So they do have to type those things in English. They have to type their essays in English. But I do allow them to type in their home language first and then to translate it. So and then it picks up all the errors. The computer picks up all the English errors, and the student is able to correct them. And eventually those errors become, they don't make those errors anymore. So I think, that's very helpful. In any sort of environment where students are comfortable in their home sort of culture is going to help them thrive with the English language, because English is one of the most difficult languages to learn, and there's a lot of similarities like with Spanish and English, so that's good. But like with the French student that I have, who's, I forget where she's from, but she is, she was the one that I was having a hard time sort of helping her succeed through, but now she's thriving. So
What was your approach when you started working with this let's call it complicated communication like students at the beginning, and what did you find that ended up in your uh academic path being like this goal?
with the like I said, like with like the French student that was trying to communicate with me, she had to use her app, her translation app, and she was able to tell me what she was having issues with, because I wasn't understanding her, some of the things that she was saying. And they're also very shy, so they're very soft spoken. You can't hear a lot of students. So I would ask her to speak up a little bit, and then she would communicate what she needed with Google Translate on her computer. And then I was able to respond to her with Google Translate, because we don't have a lot of French students. We do have a lot of Spanish speaking students. With the Spanish speaking students, I was able to, same thing, with their peers, their bilingual peers, I was able to pair them up with students, and I would tell them, can you, speak to this student and tell me what it is that you're looking for. And they would tell the student, and then that peer who was proficient in both languages would tell me exactly what they wanted, and I was able to communicate what I needed from that English learner student, or multilingual learner student. And then eventually I didn't need their friends, and they didn't need their friends. They were able to communicate with me in English, because again, they're talking to their friends, and they're, the English language is already, sort of seemed it, already in the vernacular, in the language.
Mm-hmm.
So, and eventually they're just more comfortable with what it is that they're supposed to master, because they are supposed to master the English language so that they can be A through G qualified to graduate, because they have to master the English language to graduate. But in my classroom, in my arena, I try to make it clear that it's okay to do both. And then they eventually, it's like dual language immersion, have them do everything in both languages, and then when it comes time for the test or to master, they can do things in that English language.
I understand. I would like you to talk about um, the approach that you had with your students at the beginning. Like you said that you were trying to know them, not just having their background, but actually understanding where they were coming from and what they were going through. Can you talk about a little bit?
Yeah, so I do that. I do that with questions. I do that with just talking to them. Like in the beginning of the school year, there's so many changes with our district that like scheduling changes and sometimes a lot of students leave. So I try not to make the workload too heavy. So I just ask them, where are you from? What are your interests? What do you like to do for fun? I tell them a little bit about myself too. I love ice cream. I love running. I love cooking. And I talk about all the types of foods I like. I like Spanish food. And then I'll ask them, like, what's your favorite Spanish food? Or what's your favorite food from the region that you're from? Or, because I still have American students and I'll ask them the same thing. Um, and I just think it's, in sending out, just questions, you can send out surveys, simple surveys, but I think surveys are they're hard for English learners, for multilingual learners. So I just keep it as simple as possible. Talk to them, and they'll tell me what they're like. They'll tell me what types of things they like to read. A lot of in through my research and just in my current day to day sort of work, a lot of multilingual learners love science. They love math. So it's always surprising to me um, when I get students, especially in the credit recovery class, uh, that are struggling with math or struggling with science, because that's what they love. They love it. And in the computer program and with me, they succeed more than they do with their regular teacher. Um, so it's interesting that I'm an English teacher and I'm giving them these courses that are different, uh, different subjects, and they're doing well in the computer program than with their regular teacher. And I think part of that is my knowledge and my background and sort of how to help them, be comfortable in my class, feel free to use the language in my class with their peers and their friends, and to feel free using it with their work uh, in my class. So that's the way I sort of approach it, like getting to know them and joke around with them, like just sort of, make them feel comfortable, make them laugh, and I think is very helpful.
Yes, at the pre-interview, we spoke a little bit about um, getting to know the human, right, behind the students, because I think that sometimes we, as people that belong to any kind of society or whatever, we get lost in the tag, in the role that we're in and the role that other people are in. um so when you're talking about, yeah, joking around with them and getting them to know you and asking them things about themselves, you are not just gathering information, no, you are creating this environment of trust and acknowledgement and sensitivity, and allowing them to talk or to speak in their own language is like acknowledging them and seeing them, and thank you for doing that, because I don't think that is something that only happens with multilingual learners, but with students in general. Like, it's hard for us as adults to see teenagers, to see kids, and remembering what it was like for us back then when we weren't seen, and then you grow up and then you understand life in a different depth, and it's like, okay, yeah, get things better, but it is very hard for a teenager or a kid not to be seen, and just having all this information and grades and topics and this curriculum and this pensum is called, in how we call it here in Colombia, which is the list of topics that you have to manage so you can graduate. Um, but what would you say are the challenges faced by multilingual learners and teachers overall?
Well, and that brings me to my next thought is if you're a teacher, let's say Caucasian, and don't really have, you know, your own sort of background, it's going to be hard to relate to the kids. And I think that's critical. Like a lot, like one of my students calls me professor. So I have to remind them I'm not a professor. I'm your teacher. Like, so they already think of you as this high end person, but I try to remind them that we're sort of on the same level. I'm not here to, give you an F. I'm not here to, help you fail. I want you to succeed. I want you to understand that if you're struggling, I will find a solution for you. As hard and as frustrating as it is sometimes, like with the student from, I believe South Africa, I forget the country she's from, but who's French, she I was having a hard time with her because we weren't understanding each other. So I had to talk to her English, her ELD sort of teacher, the one that's in charge of sort of her paperwork, and making sure that she's doing everything. And then we finally got on the same page, and we didn't need the ELD teacher too much anymore to sort of come to an understanding of what the expectation was in the class. So I think, you know, just making it so like you and I are on the same level, we have the same experiences. And I think, like, just sort of bringing up my own background, I tell my students all the time, my parents were immigrants, uh, you know, I, and I want you to know that, I understand a lot of the situations that you're going through. So I will do my best. If I cannot help you here at this moment, I will find a solution for you. I'll talk to your English, your ELD teacher, or the ELD coordinator that's for the district, and I'll try to figure out ways to sort of help them, because what are we here for? You know, I'm not here to fail students. I'm not here to help them, you know, go into their, life not being prepared for the real world, because it is scary now with all this new administration. So I always try to make an effort to help them understand where they're coming from, that, I understand where they're coming from, and also provide them with as many resources as possible, with as many solutions as possible. Because that's ultimately what we are. We're teachers. That's what I went into this profession for. This is my passion, finding solutions and helping kids succeed and thrive. I'm not, I'm not trying to trick them, which, there are people out there in the profession that, do that. And that's not my role. My role is that's what I do. That's what I have 3 master's degrees and a PhD. That's what I want to do for my students, is help them succeed and find solutions.
Thank you. Thank you for having that approach. It's super valuable. You wrote a book, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What is that book about? Tell me a little bit about that book, please.
Well, so the main thing that the book is about, it's about multilingual learners that most of them that I was dealing with came from Latin American countries, but they do, also arrive from other areas of the world. Like the book also covers challenges, and just like we talked about, limited access to appropriate instructional strategies, lack of teacher preparation, professional development, which is something that is not being addressed with districts. The professional development is sort of revolving around what most of the teachers want to learn about, which isn't about multilingual learners, unfortunately. It's about other stuff. And I think that's where the lack of professional development comes from. Um, the struggle of learning English while keeping up with academic content. So I think, that's what my book covers. Sort of when the students are having, number one, they have to learn the English language. Number two, they have to take all these courses, which is overwhelming for them. So that's what sort of part of what my book covers. And then, oral language primacy, the false belief that literacy must develop only after oral English proficiency. So there's a misconception out there about multilingual learners. Sort of, there's a point where they sort of, the schools stop sort of teaching them English only. Like they're just sort of thrown in there in these classes and English only. There's no modification of modification of the curriculum. There's no sort of, understanding of their cultures. But the research shows that we need to continue with sort of those strategies like that we just discussed, that we need to, translate documents if necessary. I mean, we do it in the real world when people come from different countries and they have to take the driver's license test, or they have to take all these tests that they have to do. They're in all different languages. So if we do it in the real world, why aren't we doing it in the school systems? Assessment are critical, right? So the student has to take a test, and the test is in English only. So how do we make the tests more accessible to the students? Giving them options. You have a test in English, you have a test in Spanish, you have a test in German, you have a test in French. You can take those and show your proficiency. Other things the book covers are the emotional and psychological challenges, right? Anxiety. A lot of these kids come to class anxious and stressed out due to the cultural adjustment and the culture shock. Trauma from leaving their home countries and sort of entering this xenophobic sort of world. And then fear and uncertainty, regarding their legal status. And where I work, we do have a lot of students that are, I don't know the facts, but we do I think there are issues with the legal status of a lot of them. And other issues that come into play, academic performance, impact on academic performance, and their own identity. Sort of, how do they maintain their own identity while being in this country? So those are some of the struggles too. And racism and stereotypes, those are issues within the public school systems that I've seen students deal with. Inequities in assessment and education. So how do you avoid testing bias, so that students don't feel alienated with the tests? Big words, big vocabulary words they have no familiarity with. So many assessments are designed for native English speakers, and misclassification of multilingual learners. In the past, I've dealt with students that are classified as English learners, but they're incredibly proficient with English. They do very well academically, but because the tests that they're taking to show their English proficiency is somewhat biased, they put them in English learner classes, which they don't need. So those are some of the other issues. Survey responses. My book also covers survey responses from educators, that teachers do recognize the inequities in assessment, but lack the power to change district policies. So that's another thing too. The leaders at the district level are making the decisions for English learners. Some don't have the background to deal with, English learners, or they haven't been in the classroom. They don't know what's going on in the real world. And it's not across the board, but there are many that don't really know how to sort of what's appropriate for English learner students, the curriculum that's appropriate, how to sort of bring it down to their level, you know, keep it simple, but they have a hard time with that when they're dealing with the testing and they're dealing with how the school district is performing. So all those things come into play, in terms of, challenges. And this is also, where my books, what the things that my book covers: systematic changes or challenges, funding inequities. So right now with Trump, the funding is not going to be there for English learners, because of all these decisions he's making. So, but in California, we're fighting it. The Tony Thurmond, who is our Department of Education leader, he is, he is prepared. So he is getting lawyers to, to go in and sue, the Trump administration. Oops, my screen is to sue the Trump administration, to because we need the money. But also California has a lot of other like funding pots, you know, to support English learners. So those are just some of the things that my book covers. But
Thank you. I think that is a big fight. The one that of suing the administration and you know because it is a mission to defend, to protect the resources that I want to say we, but I am not in the states. So you have to guarantee the safety of your students and immigrants. Um, I think that, and you would correct me if I am wrong, um, because it is a general conception of education and that it's within the academic system and the way we approach knowledge. The intention and the mindset behind the design of the curriculum, and the way that we evaluate knowledge. Um, what do you think? Is it like an structural problem? Is it something that is within the list of topics and the way that we approach those questions, that is not having in mind the diversity of the classroom? Diversity, not only talking language, diversity meaning the differentiation between human beings, and how we process information.
so the first part is, I definitely think it's a structural thing, policy thing. Like in California, the way we choose the curriculum is the teachers have to come to an agreement as to what type of curriculum we're doing. So if it is a great curriculum for multilingual learners and the majority of teachers don't agree with that curriculum, then that's what we go with. Um, so and again, it's that experience, that it's the leadership, what kind of backgrounds do they have and how are they bringing it to the decisions that they're making. And then the second part of your question is, I like classroom diversity. We have in California, it's a melting pot. We have every culture being represented in our classroom, but are those cultures being represented behind the desk? Yes, we have a lot of we have a lot of Latino students. We have a lot of African American students. Um, we have a lot of, Arab American students, and coming from immigrant sort of backgrounds. I don't think it's just a one size fits all, behind the desk. Like it, yeah, you can have a teacher who is of the same cultural background of, some of your students, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be effective as a teacher of multilingual students. It's sort of, you have to be able to take all of it into account, that we need to start hiring a diverse teaching staff, not only behind the desk, but also as administrators, you know, What type of background are we dealing with administration? Those that are evaluating the teachers that are dealing with a very culturally diverse classroom, because that also plays into effect, in terms of how students are behaving and how students are being treated, um, in terms of what's really going on. You know, if the student is a discipline problem, if the student is acting out, why are they acting out? What is the underlying issue that is really happening? And I think when you have a diverse teaching staff, not just of one culture, but multiple cultures, and a diverse administrative staff, and again, not just of one culture, but of multiple cultures, you're going to have a better chance of solving that student's problem. They talk about referrals. They don't want referrals. They don't want this and they don't want that. But then we need to find solutions to these kids, the issues that they're having in the classroom. Is it a language barrier? Is it, are we testing them for these things? I mean, there are multiple times when I've told, certain powers, has this person been tested for language issues? Yeah, they may be speaking proficiently, but they may be having reading and writing issues. In my background, my parents didn't speak any English, and I spoke very good English, but I was still struggling in the classroom, academically. That was like my younger years, but I overcame those things on my own. I read a lot, I wrote a lot. I just took education into my own hands. And that's what I did because I knew I wasn't going to get any help. But how do we do that for students that aren't like me, that aren't proactive, that aren't? And so that's what I bring. That's where sort of the structural part is. And I think the hiring practices, they have to start doing that, in terms of who they hire behind the desk and who they hire as administrators, because that's all part of the big picture and what the mission is of the school. Is the mission of the school to make every culture feel at home and feel comfortable, or is the mission of the school to do all these fundraisers and just make money, but what are we making money on? Are we helping these kids, learn better? Is the money that we're, that's where I come in. But, that in my own classroom, because politics is so heavily woven into the American public school system, it's very hard to make those changes, the unions and what the collective body wants. So that's a big challenge,
That is a huge challenge. You spoke about the mission. Yes. um what is the purpose of the education? A lot of people, I think, might look at what you're saying as an example of, if she could do it, then everybody can do it. Like, she learned by herself. Everybody, those kids need to learn by themselves because life is not easy. You're a teacher. You're a teacher, not, that's what I think. You might correct, please correct me if I am saying something dumb. You're a teacher not just because of what you studied, but your approach to life is teaching and learning and analyzing the way you learn and then help others learn as well. You are a teacher. Is that correct? Of I am.
Yeah, I'm a high school teacher. Yes.
Yes, I mean, but I'm saying
Oh,
that you're a teacher not just because of what you studied, but
yes.
because of your approach to life
Yes.
and how you inhabit your own self. And that is why you could do it. And it wasn't easy. I don't believe it was pleasurable, like enjoyable, feeling alone and encouraged to do it by yourself because you knew nobody else was going to help you doing that. And now your mission is helping others and educating yourself the best you can, so you can improve the experience of others, because they don't have that same approach that you have. And that's why you wrote a book, and that is why you studied, and that is why you want to talk about this the best and with the more large audience that you can get, right? Because it's important, and I believe that as well. um so it's not a thing of motivation, like, yeah, they don't learn because they are not motivated, because they don't want to learn our language because they are in our land. Is because we are different, and that's why where the diversity term comes in. It's not just a difference in the words that we use to name things. Is language is everything. Is how you name everything around you, and the relationship that concepts have with ideas and feelings is deeper than what we as societies give it credit for. And I think that that is the biggest misconception that we as society members have, you know, regarding language, regarding teaching language, learning language. Um, and I understand that you're a high school teacher, yes, and I appreciate
Yes.
the difference that you make between teacher and professor. Like, it's important how they name you, because that name includes the way they relate to you, right? And if they see you as something like unachievable, something that you need to, how do you say, bow to, maybe, like,
Yes.
yes, you're the professor, like a prophet, maybe, um
Yes.
how
Yes.
would you, is there any consideration that you have uh within the difference of the education of kids and adults in this case, in this area?
Well, and I wanted to add one thing to sort of transition into that topic is, I'm very strict. So these are teenagers. So I am very strict. I have rules, I have policies, I have all these things in place. And they're very respectful towards them, more so than the regular kid, the American kids. Um, but they're very respectful to the rules and they follow them, and they have, they have a lot of respect for teachers. And I think that's where the reason why they use that term is probably because they had a lot of respect for teachers. They look to teachers to guide them, they want to learn, you know multi English learners, they want to learn, they want to succeed. So when I see students that are not passing other classes, um, not mine, but other classes, I try to figure out like what is missing in this class. Why are they, what is that person not providing, or where is that gap in knowledge? Um, but I've taught college students too. I taught at a community college for 4 years, 3 or 4 years, and I was still dealing with multilingual learners, students that are just new to the country. Um, and I just applied the same sort of concepts, but in an adult world, and it was great, Indian students, Arabic students, and all of the different backgrounds. Uh, but I I always try to make it very clear to every student that, I'm here as your guide, guiding you through this, helping you succeed. Um, but we are high school teachers. We are still dealing with children, teenagers. So we have to give them the structure that they need, in the classroom. I'm very strict, and there are many teachers and the students, sometimes they frown upon it, but the multilingual students, like the English learners, they're very respectful towards it because that's what they're used to in their home country, very sort of strict environments. Uh, But I'm very like I have, you have to come in, you have to sort of do what you're, come in, start working. If you're struggling, raise your hand. And that's another thing too, sort of like learning how to ask for help with the multilingual learners is a thing, you know, and that may be where they struggle too, maybe where there's a barrier, not knowing how to sort of communicate. So I let them know, if you need help, raise your hand, holler, use your translation app. But they may be shy in other classes, or they may not know. I don't know what goes on in other classes, but you can sort of tell that there's, you know, barriers because they're doing well in my class. I don't believe in failing kids or giving them D's. I just think that there's always a pathway to helping every student learn. It is my passion, and it is something that I will, every day I'll try. I mean, I'll try my best to help them. And if all else fails, I at least give them, some sort of a D or D minus grade. But I don't believe that, especially multilingual learners, they are my hardest working students, the English learners. So again, when I see them sort of, not doing well, I often wonder what is missing in that environment, or what is really going on. I want to know. And sometimes they'll come talk to me and they'll let it out. I do let them know, they can always talk to me. Obviously, we're teachers. We are, in some ways, officers of the court. We are officers of a legal system. So they may have a hard time coming to say everything that's going on because we have to report it, or whatnot. But I do let them know you can come talk to me about, if you're having a bad day, let me know. We can take a break. But, I just think creating sort of that environment where when we're here, we have to be here. When we have to get back to their level when they need us to be at that level, you know. Sorry, did I answer your question?
Yes, I mean it's fantastic, and I am getting kind of emotional because I got a lot of trouble in school. I wasn't like a bad student or anything, but emotionally it was very, very challenging because the system is not kind, at least here. Here, when I was a kid, I struggled a lot with English, for example, right? And it's not I am not in an English speaking country. I am in Colombia, you know. It's different. I am not saying that I get the struggle of a foreigner just being dropped into the system in a whole different language. But I had a special teacher. Her name is Rosemary, and it got me thinking into the teacher struggles, because she was very kind, and my mom got into depression. It was a very, very tough moment for me.
I'm
Um,
really sorry.
it was terrible, but she, as a teacher, she saw me and she wanted to be there for me and be emotionally supportive. And I saw her, and I felt bad for her because she couldn't be that for every kid. A teacher has have to be a teacher for a lot of kids. Like here, the classrooms are like 40 kids in a classroom, and then you have to, you know, um, she was a math, or she's a math teacher. I don't know anything about her life, unfortunately, but I saw her struggling teaching all those loud kids, rude kids, um, and I saw her frustration because she wasn't being able to communicate with those kids. Teachers are normally not capable of communicating with the kids, and the kids cannot communicate with the teacher, and not within themselves, within the whole classroom, because we normally um don't see the complexity of communication, right? um what would you, or what is your take, or what do you think of the struggles of teachers and that frustration that they can have, and not being able to manage it, to manage that inability of communicate with their students and understanding them?
And I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I struggled and I get frustrated and I have a very short attention span. Like, and I have a very short, like, my patience does run out at some point. And, I didn't know what to do, but then I started to wise up. So for those teachers that are struggling and frustrated, seek out your resources. Number one, on your campus, what resources do you have on campus to help you navigate whatever it is with your students? When I was struggling, I would always ask the EL teachers, what do I need to do? How do I help them? How do I help students learn the curriculum? And, or do we just throw the students to the wind with the curriculum and let them figure it out on their own? Uh, but I couldn't deal with that. I'm living with these kids. Okay, that would be fine if they left and they did it on their own and I didn't have to face them. But I'm living with them. I'm living with them for 50 minutes per day with their frustration. I want peace in my life, right? I want calm in my life. I want production in my life, you know? And so I want the kids to be productive. Uh, and so I would seek English, advice from other English learners or English learner teachers. And then when that was resolved, then there were the issues of, do these kids have a learning disability? So I've tried to figure that out too. But then they'd have to get testing for that. And so, but our district, they just now, started looking at that with the English learners. What, if they have a learning disability, because if all those other multilingual barriers are gone, then we have to look at that. Are they struggling with just learning in general? So I would seek out all my resources. I would talk to the special ed departments, talk to the chair with special ed department, talk to the chair of the English learning department. If I wasn't getting anywhere, if I felt like I was still experiencing the same issue, they would lead me into the district. Talk to the district head of these departments and figure out solutions. So, or I would do Google searches. And look it up, research myself. Like, what are some practical strategies to help keep the students calm and not so angry about their own sort of frustrations? The discipline problems kids have, whether it's they want to leave class or cut class or yell at you or be mad at you or be angry with you as a teacher when you're trying to give them information or help them, is due to, number one, they don't know how to respond. They don't know how to, because that's not what they're used to. They're not used to people trying to help them. They're used to just being left to go, like, here, don't bother me. So when I came on board with this district, I was the, solution provider. And sometimes they don't want people to solve their problems. They just want to sit in their problems. But I wasn't going to be that person and be the enabler. So I think that's where you sort of start. Look at your resources. So if you're getting frustrated, if what you're trying to do is not working, look beyond. Look at your fellow teachers, ask them what's working for you, or what's helping you with this student. I think that we need to try to fix the problem and not put the student to the side, because someone else is going to have to deal with them. I've experienced it. Someone else is going to have to deal with them, and they're going to be stuck. And these kids are stuck. They're frustrated. So everyone's frustrated. So why not, try your best to help them? And it's usually, the research says it's usually better to fix these problems when they're very young. And the problem with the American public education system is they go through the system and they're just passed along, they are not, the problems aren't resolved. And when you're young, you don't show that side of your behavior yet. So they go through the system, and then when it becomes real, when they know they need this test to graduate and they're not passing, then the behavior becomes real. So,
Yes, you're talking about a struggle, no? And about some sort of like a mission that you have, and you have to go through it, and it's what a hero does, you know? A hero is in this path where you have all these struggles, and you have to go through it and be brave and anything, you know? And that is like being the adults in the conversation. Like you might be struggling with your own frustration and your own complexities and your own traumas and everything, no? And
mhm.
you have to work on yourself so you can heal all those things and go through it with your own students, and then have this bravery of getting the information and not just like laying down and feel bad about the thing, but actually like doing something about it. And that requires passion, no?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
requires a lot of
absolutely.
passion and strength, and that is the task. Maybe it's a task, kind of a task, you know, of the educators, that they have to um work on the environment and work on themselves through the environment, and work on the environment through themselves, you know? It's anyway, I'm sorry, I get a little emotional, and this empathy work that you're describing is beautiful.
But
What is
no,
the name
no,
of
please share us whatever you want.
thank you. What is the name of your book?
It's a long. So I have 3 books.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So the first book is Understanding and Improving How K-12 Multilinguals Are Taught, Supporting Multilinguals. So that's the first one. And I actually have 3 books out. The second one is Research-Based Bilingual Instruction, the impact of multiple modalities in a K-12 English learner classroom. And then the third one, which is actually my first book, that I took for my PhD dissertation. I turned my dissertation into a book. The struggles of minority English learners, how learner feedback can improve English skills. And you can find them anywhere, Amazon, uh, any online bookstore, but they're available through ebook or whatnot. But I do find that a lot of the books are, they give you practical strategies, and they give you sort of the history and the impact of what's been going on in the past, and through the years.
It's okay, I think we can start wrapping up the conversation. But I wanted to say something first, before saying goodbye. um you use this image of raising the arm, like asking for help first,
Yes.
like requesting the permission to talk, to speak in the classroom, but it's also asking for help, you know? And you said that kids aren't used to ask for help or finding help and support in their uh schools, you know,
Yeah.
because yeah, everything we do is like demanding things from her, and telling them what to do, and I believe that's super violent as well. But imagine, like, when you're a kid, especially when we're kids, I mean, when we're adults we also have this problem, but especially when we're kids, we struggle a lot with naming things and naming how we feel. Is very tough, because when you grow up you realize, this was happening to me when I was a kid, and I didn't even, how are you supposed to know, you know? How are you supposed to know that we, because you didn't have that experience before, so you don't know what's actually happening. um Asking for help and being able to give that help to students, and students, I like to talk about students. It's a big word, a broad word, because it covers not just kids but also adults and teenagers and whatnot. um Students are learning to name things in a systematic way, right? That's why the curriculum is for. You give name to concepts, and this process is called this, and it works this way, and the way to name, to describe this process, are these words relating to each other. It's all words, no? And it's hard for us as native speakers. I'm talking myself about a Spanish native speaker, to learn this in Spanish, and now learning it in a different language is more complicated. And then when you're in a totally different culture, you don't know what's happening around you, and you're an alien, like a legal and a complete alien in a so totally different reality. And finding someone um, able and willing to help you navigate that experience is priceless. So thank you, Marianne. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, and thank you for what you do. I believe it is priceless. You cannot pay anybody enough. you cannot you cannot describe what you do unless you do it. And thank you for trying to explain that to us today.
Thank you very, very much for having me on and listening and hearing me out. And it was nice hearing your story as well. And nice that you were able to share your story, because I think that adds to everything that I've been talking about, which is, it's not a one size fits all.
Thank you for listening to Echoes of Meaning. My name is Camila Sabogal, growth marketer and media producer at MultiLingual Media. And if today's conversation stayed with you, we'd really appreciate it if you left a comment or rated the podcast wherever you're listening. It helps more people find these stories and the meaning behind them. See you next month, and please remember to listen.